I put some perfume on just for this video, just in case you can't tell. I did. I've just been in a mood, and I decided, well, I'd make a video. You know, I don't know if you guys remember, we're going to adjust this a little bit, but I remember wearing garter belts with hose. Now, the seam hose kind of went out of favor, I think in the early 60s. And then we came up with pantyhose. But before that, I wore garters with seamed hose. And when I was doing my vintage clothing, I traveled cross country, going to small towns, contacting people, trying to find out if somebody had what they call a new old stock. New old stock is where an old store has just closed down. They've boxed all their new stock and it's been in storage for 50 years. So I contacted this one girl, I think it was Ohio. Her grandfather had an old clothing store, and it had been shut down. I'm not sure the whole story, but I contacted her, and I said, well, I was doing Clouds in the Sky with Keanu Reeves, and who else was it? Oh, I can't remember, but the name of the movie was Clouds in the Sky. First movie I ever did. And they said they were looking for seamed stockings, originals from the 1940s. And this girl had them in the original boxes. I don't know how many pairs she shipped me, but I sold every single pair to Clouds in the Sky. They were thrilled to have original 1940 stockings in the box. Yeah, that was kind of fun. Yeah, when I was doing vintage clothing, it was kind of fun that, the people I would meet, and you met a lot of movie stars. And I told the story before, but I met Jennifer Tilly. Very bad circumstances. She came in to see somebody else. I was the only one on that side of the building. I took the space. You paid for your space, and you only got so many square feet. I took part of my square feet and built a dressing room for one person who could go in and change as a service for my customers. And these girls down the way sent Jennifer Tilly down to change in my dressing room. And I looked at her and I said, excuse me, what are you doing? She goes, well, I was told I could use your changing room. And I said, no, you can't. Are you my customer? Oh, well, no, I'm her. I said, no, I paid for this. This is for my customers. If you want to come back and buy something from me and try something on with their stuff, more than willing. But no, you cannot use it. Well, these girls got furious. And they run down, how dare you, blah, blah. That was Jennifer Tilly. I didn't even know who Jennifer Tilly was. I said, okay, yeah, whatever. Well, she's a movie star, but I said, I don't care. I paid for this space. You did not. I was smart enough to have my own dressing room. You were not. She can use the public dressing room. Well, she's too shy. Well, that's not my problem. Not my problem. So Jennifer Tilly didn't think too much of me. But I had this lady. She has passed away. She had an antique store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And going through one of my cross-country trips, I had met her because I would go in the phone book and look for all the antique stores or vintage stores that they had. And I went into this woman's, and she started sending me boxes of vintage clothing. She would go to estate sales. This is when vintage clothing was affordable for me to buy and to resell, And one box had a 1920s orange velvet coat. But the inside was turn-of-the-century brocade silk. Someone had taken an older turn-of-the-century coat and used it as lining. This fabulous brocade silk coat into lining for this 1920s coat. I took that out, and because both sides are beautifully, it was flowers and birds. It was so beautiful. I made it a jacket. I took all the velvet off, and it was just stunning. And I just made it a simple jacket. That's all I did. And Jennifer Tilly really wanted it. So she did come to my booth several shows later, and she said, "You remember me?" I said, "Yes." And I must apologize for what they did. I said, if someone had come down and asked me politely if one of their customers could use my dressing room, it might have been different, but just sending you down here I thought was very rude of them. Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, Jennifer Tilly left. I gave her a discount, and she was very happy. And from that point on, she didn't ever buy anything else from me, but she would always say, "Hi, how are you?" So it was, it amended things a little bit. But I just thought it was really rude of them to do that. If they could have come down and asked my permission, but to just send a customer, a movie star no less, that I don't even know who's a movie star, was very rude, so those were the days, yeah. And on some cross-country trips, I would find other things. I finally got into antiques. I love glassware, and I love colored glassware. I love vases, and I've given Jason some incredible ones. I did a lot of thrift storing in the 80s and 90s. Trust me, I got some fabulous, fabulous vases and planters. Just, I was really into that. But, they always talk about, how much money they make on thrifting. Well, thrifting, you have to pay PayPal. You have to pay eBay or Etsy or whoever you're using. You have to pay to list it, and how you list it, how expensive it is. Then you have to remember to charge for postage, or you pay for postage. You don't make that much. You make a little bit. Sounds like a lot. I paid $5. I sold it for $35. But again, you have to remember all the fees. So they have to deduct those fees out. But to make a long story short, I'm getting too involved in this. Everybody says, "Oh, I only paid $5. I got $1 million for it." Remember when they found that Constitution replica in a picture frame, $1 million or something? No, that didn't happen. However, I had one time, I went into my favorite thrift store, and there was this Buddha, and he was sitting there. It was like a baby Buddha. He was beautiful. He was really kind of unusual. He wasn't something a lot of people would be interested in, and I liked him, so I bought him for $5. I thought, well, maybe I'll make $20. $635 later, it was bid from some people in China, and they had a little museum, and it was a very special Buddha. Not many were sold. They wouldn't tell me a lot about it. They don't want, people don't want you to know a lot about it. And they wouldn't tell me a lot about it. But that was the only thing that I ever really made out on, was this silly little, he was about this big. I just loved him. I loved him. I just thought he was the cutest thing. And, yeah, it was worth a lot of money. I think he was put in a museum. I'm sure he was worth a lot more than I got, too, okay? But, yeah, so that was kind of cool. But other than that, the vintage clothing, after a while, more and more people, if I sell it, at estates, they were making it higher than what I could resell it for. So I wouldn't buy things. But other people would, and then they would, my dresses were a couple $100. Theirs would be $500, $600, $700. And, yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of a different kind of atmosphere, and it was something I really, really enjoyed. I really enjoyed cleaning, the touch of the fabrics, how to clean it. I don't know if you know that silk is made from worms, and worms are protein. And if you want to make silk stronger, you put a couple drops of honey, which is pure protein, into your water, and you soak it. You soak them, and it strengthens and helps the silk. Now, these were the old silks. I don't know about the new silks, but the old silks, they also put into the silk. They put something to make it weigh because they sold the silk by the weight. And I forget what it was, and it would deteriorate the silk over years. But they added an ingredient, excuse me, to add weight to the silk. That was turn of the century on. Some silks were perfectly fine, but certain countries did certain things to the silks. And you'd have them in a trunk. You'd buy this trunk, right? And it was full of all this beautiful clothing. And you'd open it up, and after a few days in the air, it would shred. You just paid $400 for a trunk of clothing, and the clothing would just shred if it was silk, particularly silk, from the air, the mixture in the air, and this ingredient, I forget what, lead. I think it was lead. They put lead in the silk, and that would rot the silk over time. And when it hit the air and it had been enclosed, it would just literally fall apart. Just some interesting facts, and I've been thinking, and I thought I'm trying to talk every day to you guys, and not always just talk about life, but talk about some of the things that I did with my life. And one of them was selling vintage clothing to the movie industry, as well as individuals at shows, but mainly my sales were to the movie industry. And it was kind of interesting, you know. It was a lot of fun. I met a lot of movie stars. I learned so much, and I had such great respect for many of the costumers. There were a lot of wonderful costumers that I worked with. It was just, it's kind of fun to say I was part of the industry for a very short, far off part, okay? Not an important part, just a far off part that you dealt with that industry, because we see the movies, and I always, never wanted to be a movie star. I didn't figure that'd ever happen. I had no talent whatsoever. But just to be involved and seeing how they worked and seeing the costume houses, and it was a very interesting period in my life, and one that I really, really enjoyed, and I loved doing it. But you couldn't replace things once you sold them, and you couldn't find them again. And of course, that's all changed. I don't know how now that I'm out of the business, I don't know how vintage clothing does at all now. But it was super popular, and all the movie people wanted authentic, original pieces if they could get them, and they paid pretty good money, So I'm gonna let you go. I just thought I'd talk about some of the experiences I had, and if you remember those garter belts and seam nylons, because I sure do. That was kind of, and now it's considered very sexy. I'll talk to you later. Guys, if you share this, it really helps me by sharing it. The more you share it, the more possibilities that the algorithm will build up for me. So I would really appreciate it if you did. And thank you for subscribing and watching and commenting. I'll see you next time, and I send you my love.